son, where'd you find this?
Buckle up, buttercups. It's time to get down to business. It's the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. Totally legit.
All right, folks, it is once again the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Just a quick friendly reminder, if you could like and subscribe, that is a huge help for the channel. Today we've got a very exciting guest, a manipulator of energy and a builder of super cool Orgone amplifiers, Jay from Orgone Amplifiers.
Thank you.
Thank you again for agreeing to come on here. And, on the show, we've talked about electroculture. We've talked about harnessing energy from a number of different sources. I actually recently just had a guy on who's trying to build an energy harvester from sonoluminescence. He's going to capture sonoluminescence and try and harness some energy from it. But I mean, I was immediately sucked in. I came across your stuff on TikTok. And on top of the amps that you build being visually striking, I've also been interested in Orgone energy and cloud busting and kind of from the periphery. So I guess if you just want to give a quick intro for yourself and what it is that you do, and then we'll kind of jump into Orgone energy and building amplifiers to amplify it.
Sure, yeah. So I am an electrical engineer by trade. That's kind of where my skill set comes from. And, when I first, started this thing, I was kind of skeptical. I saw a piece of Orgonite at a music and arts festival. And it was late at night one night, and I kind of looked at the vendor, and I was like, so what is this thing? He had a little sign and a plaque, and he's like, it's Orgonite. It produces Orgone energy, and I was immediately intrigued. Coming from kind of a semiconductor background, learning physics at some of its minute levels in chips and etc. To learn about some type of element of the universe that was either undiscovered or overlooked because of various reasons. And I wanted to know more about it. And so from there, the pandemic happened, and we all had a lot of time to think about things. And, it kept coming up, kind of crossing my mind, I would kind of laugh at it, scoff at it. And then I would try and think about what it is that people were so drawn about it, why it kept popping up. And I learned about kind of the history behind it and the scientist that discovered this energy, Wilhelm Reich. And I learned that he wrote a lot of books about it. And so kind of doing some of that research into his story and what he had to say, and then these devices that people would create, we were interested in it as a whole. And so we just decided, or I decided really at this point, to try and make a device, understand Orgonite in its entirety, make a device that is electronic and replicates the action, whatever action was supposed that this device made, Orgonite, and then make an electronic version of that, and try and study some of the effects. Now, I'm fully aware that people have labeled it pseudoscience in the past, and that anyone that tries to touch it inevitably gets burned by some layer of authority, either on the subject of medical science or the subject of physics, or just authorities in general. And so we weren't really trying to ruffle any feathers. We were really just trying to kind of understand it. And so I thought about it for a while. Looked into the details behind it, came up with our best crack at a electrical device that creates this energy called Orgone, and did some various experiments with it. One of those experiments was taking it up to high altitude and testing the effects kind of on weather, in the same way that Wilhelm Reich tested his Cloudbuster on weather. And so what we noticed is that there are some weird effects that that happened when we took these devices up to high altitude, and it happened so often that we couldn't really deny that there was something there. From a statistical significance perspective, there was something that was a little bit extraordinary, out of the ordinary, than what we would have expected. And so that's kind of what started us down this journey. From then on, we published a few papers about how the Orgone amplifier works, how to build it, and formed kind of a open source research organization around it to try and further the study. And we use the device sales to further our research initiatives in the field. And so that's kind of the story of the OA and where we are now. And, that's kind of picking up to where you found us on TikTok, us doing experiments, taking it up again to high altitude, and looking at all the various things that people have reported over the years on Orgone. And so our idea, in the future is to compile all of this, further this research, and create kind of a third article to really describe some of the effects and some of the mechanisms that we see in Orgone affecting, the real world.
I love it. I just want to show people so that they can see the things that you guys build, because what originally drew me in was how beautiful the circuitry was. Like that immediately caught my eye, like the visual aesthetic of it. And then once it clicked what it was and what it was trying to do, then it started to become even more like this is what I had known Orgone amplifiers to be up until I saw what you guys are doing. And, I had seen some pretty convincing videos on YouTube of people cloud busting with those very large iterations of the pyramidal type structures. And again, I was kind of familiar with electroculture and a couple other things that are similar in nature, but in the sense of like harnessing abundant energy or amplifying abundant energy that exists but can't necessarily be tapped into. I'm also a huge fan of, Nikola Tesla and all the things that he was trying to do with electricity. So a lot of these things to me seem like the reason why I think the authorities oppose it is the classic line from JP Morgan to Nikola Tesla: how do we put a meter on it? If the you have to enter into the gateway of interfacing with these things, somebody's going to want to make some money off of it. And the stuff that you guys are making, in my opinion, is the only thing worth spending any money on if you're trying to familiarize yourself with this a concept or experiment with it yourself. So again, I want to, the visual aspect of the circuit board blew my mind. The first time seeing a practical application of like, okay, how do we, if we're talking about harnessing this thing, how do we actually harness it in a quantifiable way? So this is just anecdotal too. The first time I ever heard about it was also at a music festival. I think I was at Bonnaroo and I was talking to somebody and they kind of planted that seed in my mind, and I haven't been able to get it out of my head. But coming across your stuff is the first time I've seen like a tangible application of this that isn't that has some kind of science, extra science behind it, and not just a conversation that you have with someone at a music festival. So I'm wondering, before you knew about Orgone energy, before you started building the amplifiers, what familiarity did you have with harnessing or channeling abundant electronic energy? Like, were you a fan of Nikola Tesla? Was that something you were into? Had you come across electroculture, or was this, when you found out about this was an entirely new concept and kind of you got swept away with it?
Yeah. So, thank you. That, a lot of points. I appreciate it. So to answer the last question that you had, about, I studied electrical engineering, so I knew about Nikola Tesla. I knew about the works that he, contributed. I studied, everything from AC current up until, advanced communications. And so he was, the father of those things. And so, I've learned a lot of what he had to say. And was I interested in his work? Yes, definitely. I've heard of the Wardenclyffe Tower before. I could say that I understood, the type of mechanisms that he was going for with that invention, and some of his ideas inevitably carried over to the Orgone amplifier. We use, one of his probably the most groundbreaking help for technology that he's given us is AC current. That's what all of our power lines depend on. And with the AC current, he gave us the mechanism of the transformer, the AC transformer, and those parts are used in the Orgone amplifier today. So yes, we knew of Tesla's work. We know of his ambitions and his story, and how he essentially sacrificed his career for the good of humanity. And I guess to kind of point out some of the things that you said earlier, drawn in by the visual, these devices that we build specifically, Orgone amplifiers, are made to be, artful, pretty. It is kind of a specialty of mine to package electronics in a different way. This is, you don't really see electronic boxes that are clear and artful like this. But we released the circuit as open source. I think I mentioned that before. So anyone can go and make a circuit that looks any way that they want, and it would still be an Orgone amplifier. And so, yeah, that's, it doesn't have to be that way. We just chose to make it that way. And kind of some of our, lower end devices, I wouldn't even say lower end devices, just lower power devices, the 100 and 200, they're just a black box. They're you don't see through them, kind of like our other devices. And they're not meant to be pretty. They're meant to be kind of a little bit more tough, so that you could bring them around, and small for the same reason. And what we wanted to do, because we discovered this way to make Orgone electronically, is the main advantage is the power to weight ratio. And so the amount of Orgone that you can produce with such a small package is orders of magnitude times greater than what you can do with what the current Orgone technology was, which was either pulsed EMF Orgone or Orgonite, that just relied on kind of the EMF in the surrounding area. And so by including a power source, we were able to make a device that could potentially be more powerful than what we see from any of those two technologies, which is, I think, the real advancement in what we've done. Is, we didn't discover Orgone, that was already done. We didn't, yes, we've made some kind of artful, devices, but really the power availability of allowing Orgone to be produced by an electric power source made it so that you can create again, a device that would be more powerful than possible with existing technologies. And so going on that, by making orgonite or producing orgone electronically, we're able to do kind of some interesting things, like with what we see with the Orgone 4000, which is modulate other frequencies on top of the orgone output, which is like what early AM radios would do, effectively creating the first orgone radio. And so, yeah, that's the device right there. You could kind of see it. There are kind of some videos on our Instagram page. I don't know if you want to bring those up, but
I've got it.
yeah,
right
that's kind
here.
of the
Yep.
gist of it.
That you can see that, right?
Yes.
All right, killer. Yep. Wow. Yeah, so it's pretty interesting too, because you're like positioned. You're out in Colorado, Mountain Time
Yes.
somewhere.
Yeah.
So you've already got elevation working for you, so you could not be in a better spot in the country to be trying this stuff, you know?
Yeah, it was kind of an interesting intersection of all of the, we're good at electronics. That's, where we came from. We're in this place that's not only, beautiful, but also, in these locations that need orgone the most for environmental healing. And at high altitude, it's been said that it is more effective. We haven't necessarily discovered the reason for that at on a subatomic level, but that is what we've heard. And so from a statistical standpoint, to see these events over and over is really, really interesting. It signals to me that there's something interesting there that's happening.
Yeah, so that would be the next question, is like, you talk to this guy, you find out about this thing, you become interested in it. At what point in the reading were you like, man, there really is something here? And at what point does that turn into, like, again, testing this out and being like, oh, we're actually onto something? Were there like specific moments where their light bulbs go off?
Well, I mean, it was really, I personally am, I'm not energy sensitive. Okay. Some people are really, really energy sensitive. So one of the original creators of Orgonite, Don Croft, worked with his wife, who was an empath, or a starseed, if you would, and she would be able to tell devices that are more powerful than others, and through a process of trial and error, they were able to create what they were creating. And so, me being kind of a non-believer, and also being less sensitive to energy than maybe some would say they are, was strictly coming at it from a scientific angle, saying, okay, if this is correct, and if this is, what people say is happening, then from that evidence, you can deduce conclusions that, there were certain things, and what I mean by this, I'm trying to summarize it, is that there were themes over and over in people's technology that when we looked at it, we see over and over the concept of Quartz's piezoelectricity being mentioned. And going off of that, we said, okay, if this is the effect that everyone points to, that everyone says is the main actor here, then let's prod at that a little bit further, and let's make a device that's based on that, and let's see how that performs. And so by doing that, at the point that I made the device, the first Orgone amplifier, I was not convinced either way. I was completely objective, seeing, what this creation could do, if anything. And by taking it to high altitude locations, we started in the summertime. We were able to drive up to some of these, high altitude locations instead of like in the wintertime where we'd have to ski tour or take snowmobiles.
Sure.
By doing that in the summertime, in the middle of July, there was one crazy incident where it snowed in the middle of the summertime. Even at 10,000 feet. And we would take it up there and, it would be a blue sunny day sometimes. And then all of a sudden it would be stormy, or there would be snow again, or, there would be a precipitation event that maybe not snow, but maybe close to snow. And this happened over and over, on the basis of 8-9 times, over the course of the summer and into the fall, where into the fall was especially surprising because it would be typically the dry season. And then, snow would start to come in the very late fall, November, around Thanksgiving, early October, November, late October. And so to see these out of place events, we would say, okay, that was unlikely, but then how many unlikely events could you see before you say, okay, there's a correlation effect here? And from that statistical standpoint, it was hard to ignore, as, looking at it objectively, we would have 7 different independent data points. I would say that would be 7 independent variables. And usually people say the statistical significance of independent variables would be usually around 10, where, you could claim, a 99.9% confirmation that you have a statistical event. Well, we did it 7 times, and so that's about a 95% confidence interval. 95% confidence interval effects are stronger than a lot, of what people would expect. And, Orgone is notoriously hard to measure. It doesn't interact with the world, with the universe in, very obvious ways. And so this kind of made sense to us on how it can go overlooked for so long, ignored, people dismissing it, because if it's very weak interacting with the world around us, then, people can dismiss it very easily as non-effectual.
Well, this is I harp on this all the time on the show. I have explained this a million times over the course of my life to people, and like the concept of wave energy. Everything that we're interacting with in tangible reality is some manifestation of wave energy, right? And we live in a time right now where our entire society is propelled by invisible wave energy. People just think we have cell phones and they just work, and that there isn't like some kind of conduit between the phone and the satellite. Like, how does the thing get to you? It's because we're swimming in energy. At every level, we're swimming in energy. And we have harnessed it to a certain degree pretty well. But to say that like we understand it all or we have mastered it would be a hilarious instance of human ignorance. And, especially looking into the work of Tesla and even Wilhelm Reich, like at the time, these are concepts that are hard for people to understand now. So back then, no one wanted to hear it. No one would have believed it at all. And I'm still in some ways convinced that, especially the abundance of electromagnetic energy that we're surrounded by right now is already having some tangible negative effects on our health. And, we interface with it. There has to be some consequence by being surrounded by all of these different electrical things that are emitting electromagnetic radiation. And, again, this is ultimately what leads me down the path of looking into this topic, is because how do you fight that? How do you carve out a bubble in a sea of electromagnetic wave energy? How do you protect yourself from that? How do you create anything that combats that? I mean, I live in New York. There are antennas and cell phone repeaters on every building. It's everywhere. And to say that we as organic beings are not interacting with that microwave energy, that's silly. But most people still just they haven't gotten to that point. So at what point for you were you like, oh yeah, this is actually tangible?
Yeah, so we came at it from an environmental perspective. When it comes to like the environment, we've spent a lot of time in the lands of the Western United States, and so we had a deep attachment to these areas, incredibly beautiful, but yet all we see out of these lands is that they're dying. They're becoming drier, more desolate, more like a desert. And some people have used including Wilhelm Reich has shown evidence that Orgone exposure to environments helps heal them in the ways that they particularly need to be healed, and usually that means an increased rainfall for these struggling desert environments. And so when we see human industrialization, both the emission of carbon, the putting up of the emission of all of these electromagnetic waves, that we don't truly know what they do to biology, because after all, biology is the study of kind of electric charges and how chemicals interact in these very complex ways. And so some of the areas that people are interested in how this increase in electromagnetic waves is affects biology is in places like epigenetics, cancer, immunology. We basically know nothing about how the immune system works. We're just scratching the surface there. DNA expression, I think that's part of eugenics. And kind of the way that bodies, or at least biology, just reacts to these fast-moving electromagnetic waves. We know that water has a emission, or not a absorption spectra in the microwave band. That's how microwaves work, to heat up your food. They just blast it with, 2.4 gigahertz. And that's, or it's actually like 2.1, but there's microwave bands on either side of, this water spectra. And it's very interesting to see how Orgone can help biology in this aspect. Now, we have not tested this ourselves, being fully upfront here. But what we have seen is people reporting that electromagnetic waves would become either less intense or altogether would not affect them under the presence of Orgone. Now, we know that the electromagnetic waves would still be in the air because you still have cell service, you still have Wi-Fi, you still have the Bluetooth. But yet, these people would feel much better. And we think that this effect is that Orgone allows biology to continue unaffected without necessarily feeling the effects of electromagnetic waves. And that could be through any number of mechanisms, through either structured water, through, how the carbon ring, interacts with Orgone, through how, your body uptakes Orgone and uses it for some cellular process. I think we've got a doctor that's interested in kinea, which is almost like a light life, if you would. People have described Orgone as a life energy, but that mechanism is still at, a biological level, still being explored. And so what we do have is, again, more statistical evidence. And what we can point to, when it comes to saying, these people feel something better. Now, a lot of people would say, okay, that's placebo. That's a classic case of placebo. Yeah. Now, what I would say to that is that a placebo effect has usually a rate that works, and this is a common scientific knowledge, that people use to design tests, works about 20 to 40% of the time. Okay, so that would mean that 20 to 40% of the time in general population, our or any Orgone device, not just our Orgone device, any Orgone device, would not work on some random statistical sample.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's say we cut that down from general population to the population that is around, that knows about this, and that would also buy our devices. So there might be some skew there, maybe up to 60% would be effective. And that's, something that I estimate. Okay. That's not something that I can pull from another scientific paper, but that's just my estimate, is that it would probably work 60, maybe the highest 80% of the people that actually go out and buy our devices. Now, at the time that I'm talking to you, our sales on Etsy are about 750. Okay, and we have, I'm not tuning our own horns here, but we've got a solid 5.0 rating. And we've got 3 instances of a return device for factors that are not factors that they could or could not feel it. Okay, so that means that virtually all of those 750, we'll call it 747 devices that we've manufactured and sold, have gone out and were effective. Or else we would have seen a return rate of about 20%.
Yeah.
20 to 40%. Okay. If it was 60 to 80% effective, we would expect at least some of those 750 to come back and say, this did not help me in any way.
I noticed no difference. Yeah.
I noticed no difference. But yet, nearly 100%, I would say 95%, again, this 95% number comes up, of the devices that have gone out were effective, did help people with the 5G in their space and in their homes and even in their neighborhoods. And no one said that this was not effective to me. And so that is a really powerful statement, because that's nearly 750 independent reviewers that have looked at this device and said, yes, that works for me. Through whatever mechanism that it does work, we're not claiming to know the mechanism yet. The research still has to be done there. But that's at the moment what I hang my hat on in saying there cannot not be something that's there.
Yeah. There's definitely a there. Yeah.
And so that's the hardest analysis that I've seen, in terms of effectiveness for any, person conducting almost a subjective test when it comes to Orgonite.
Well, I mean, especially with the internet, people hate giving 5-star reviews.
It's true.
People, if there was a problem, they would say it because that's what people on the internet do, for sure.
Yeah. And,
go ahead.
And so, people have called me, all sorts of names, saying that I'm a grifter or, that I'm not doing this and, with good intentions. But when you buy a product and it does what you expect it to do and it exceeds those expectations, that can't be a scam. That's just a business.
Yeah. Yeah, right. That's a correctly operating business. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's kind of my perspective to it.
Well, I mean, there's a couple things. This is another kind of anecdotal thing. I recently learned, I'm pretty sure the manufacturer of the first kitchen microwaves was Raytheon.
Yes,
that's if that doesn't put things into perspective for you for what we're dealing with here, and that's an acceptable device for you to have in your home. Raytheon doesn't make devices for peacetime. They make devices for wartime. And they just figured out a way to package it in a way that it could go in your home and they could make some more money off of it. This is another thing I've gone on a bunch of tangents about on the show. They literally have these things on some trucks, police vehicles in the city, but all around the world, definitely in war. They're microwave antennas that they use to beam at large crowds for crowd dispersal. And people who have stood downrange of that antenna will literally say, it feels like my skin is burning. It's like cooking me, because it is cooking you, right?
Definitely.
And
it is, yeah. And
we're surrounded by a million devices, prosaic, everyday devices, cell phone towers, repeaters, Wi-Fi. These things are beaming out energy, and to think that we as humans are not interacting with that in some way, and that it isn't having some kind of negative health impact is, to me, it's always felt silly. And I won't be surprised in 30 or 40 years when our generation of folks starts to find a new cause for a cancer that we're all getting. Or, I mean, especially, cell phones. We're holding this up to our head. This is a microwave device. It's right next to our brain. There has to be some kind of impact there. So I don't know, to what you're saying. This is why I see what you do as valuable, because it's like, what is the average person's defense against that? We're not defense contractors. We're not Raytheon.
Yeah.
We don't have, we can't build Faraday cages everywhere. If you're lucky to live in a super concrete building that is underground, you might escape some of it, but you're still probably going to have a Wi-Fi router down there.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. Good that you bring this up. So, when I talk about Orgone being excuse me, something that allows biology to continue without the effects of the electromagnetic radiation, what I'm talking about is a little bit more deep than surface level, than skin level, and goes down to kind of cellular interactions and those things. And so this is low-level EMF exposure. Now, we're still swimming in this kind of soup, if you would, of electromagnetic radiation. But these high-power applications where you're right in the middle or right downrange of the antenna, like you said, very much is cooking you like a microwave.
Literally.
And the OA or any Orgone won't won't defend against that. You can't just bring an Orgone amplifier or a piece of orgonite into, a riot and expect, to be fine.
Shielded, yeah.
Yeah, shielded. The only way to do that is with a Faraday cage or that continuous, reflective surface and not necessarily light reflective, but reflective to a incoming electromagnetic wave. It will bounce off of that. It's one of the reasons why people have tinfoil hats, so to speak. That's where the joke comes from.
Right.
And so that's kind of, I want to make that clear because I don't want anyone to put themselves in danger in that way. And it's similar to, I think there's another company called Aries Tech that will do something similar, but make electromagnetic waves not, interact with your biology in the same way, if I'm understanding it correctly. But, I haven't really done that much work on their stuff, so I won't really speak on it. But we see these ideas kind of over and over. And we've seen kind of people use, different technologies. You've probably seen people use orgonite. You've probably seen people use tensor rings, shungite, etc. And so we're not, we're not making any of those claims about any of these technologies. We've just see these themes come up again and again. And that's why we're mentioning it.
Yeah, no, I absolutely, completely agree. Do not expect to stand any chance against a Raytheon microwave crowd dispersal device. And my concern isn't really of those things either, because I don't necessarily find myself in situations often where they would be using a microwave device against me. But in the sense of like, how does the everyday person who's getting, like you were saying, low-level exposure to this stuff in your home, in your job, in your neighborhood, what recourse do we have? And this to me seems like a reasonable, easily applicable thing to add to whatever your infrastructure is to reduce the effects of that as much as possible. I have gone far down the rabbit hole of electromagnetic radiation poisoning and the things that people say they experience from that. But the actual science there has been none. There's been very little research there, and a lot of the research that would come out and say something negative about us being so close to cell phone towers has been suppressed for the same interests that we've already previously mentioned. There's $1 billion industry behind it, and if that information comes out, that industry is going to be held liable for the negative health consequences, and they've got billions of dollars of resources. They're going to do whatever they can to not have to be held responsible for that. But I think just in the general sense, this to me seems like an easy way for you to apply this in your general surrounding to, again, just in some way combat against those. I will not be surprised in 30 or 40 years when our generation starts to have these very specific types of cancers in specific spots in our body that correlate directly with where we're holding the cell phone, the pocket that we put our cell phone in, the how close you're standing to the microwave. Like, we're the guinea pigs there. These technologies didn't really exist until just recently, and we just don't know enough about them to say they're totally safe. There is no negative effect. So I guess this might be a good point to kind of talk about Wilhelm Reich and like another instance of a scientist who's trying to explore these territories and then gets ruthlessly shut down by the powers that be because of, again, the vested interests. I'm just interested if you could talk a little bit about Wilhelm Reich, how he discovers these things, and ultimately the things that he was able to accomplish at the time that he was most active in doing them.
Sure, yeah. So Wilhelm Reich he started out as a psychoanalyst working under Freud, and he had some controversial theories, just like Freud did, about how electricity works in the body. And he went on to develop some of these theories and generalize them to biology, cellular biology. And when looking at some of these things in cellular biology, he would do experiments where he would autoclave microorganisms, which means that he would sterilize them. He would put them under a high pressure and temperature environment to purposefully sterilize them. But he realized that there were some weird things going on, and a lot of people attributed it to Brownian motion, which is something that Albert Einstein had discovered in the early 20th century. But there was some evidence that Wilhelm Reich knew of this after a long time, but still managed to present evidence that it was not this effect, and so that there was also something other there going on, something extra. And he kept doing experiments with his ideas that eventually led to something in the universe, a cosmic energy that he called it, that was independent of the matter that he was experimenting on. And that's where he led to things that were much diverged from what he was originally studying. But he did do experiments that were in line with, how experimentation was standardized during that time. And so he also came to conclusions that were controversial. And then based on those conclusions, he then kept working without writing. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I lost my train of thought. He kept doing those experiments that proved to him there was something extra there, and he was the only person that he was trying to convince. And so a lot of people disagreed with his approach there. But he came to conclusions that eventually led him to devices that made him famous, like the Cloudbuster or the Orgone accumulator. And there were a lot of people that did not like the conclusions that he came to. He did some research with cancer. Our official stance is that we are not experimenting with cancer. There might be other people that want to experiment with orgone and cancer, but we are not going to touch it at the moment because we don't have the qualifications to make definitive claims there.
Sure.
But even Wilhelm Reich himself said that there was more study to be done regarding cancer and orgone. And he did not say that orgone would cure cancer. In fact, even some of his patients did end up dying of cancer, but some of his patients had helped very much. Now, where we think that orgone can help with cancer patients is in recovery from chemotherapy, recoup, and regeneration. And possibly feeling more feelings of vitality, more better able to deal with the effects of chemotherapy, increased appetite, etc. And so if you are if you do have cancer, we are 100% not advocating orgone to be your only treatment or your magic card. Definitely do seek medical, advice and attention. But on the other side, yeah, we have seen it, and other people have reported feeling better using orgone therapy during those that disease.
There's another person who's kind of like a similar trajectory as Wilhelm Reich and his research, Royal R. Reich. I don't know if you're familiar with that name.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had a guy on the show a few times. His name's Dr. Stephen Ross, and for a long time he was the steward of all of Reich's notebooks and personal letters, and even for a time had Reich's microscope. But
yes,
and Reich, the universal microscope, not everyone, but the universal. And for those that didn't see that episode, Royal Reich was a master of microscopic technology. Back in like the 20s and 30s, he was developing microscopes that were only using light and were able to magnify by orders of magnitude greater than any existing microscope that was out there. And supposedly he was able to not only determine a light frequency that corresponded with certain cellular organisms, he was also able to determine, based on the math there, he was able to determine sonic frequencies that could like destroy these things. The only reason I'm bringing that up is because there's another guy who, well before this time, right now, almost contemporary to Tesla himself, was talking about cutting edge science that even by today's standards would be cutting edge, but ultimately gets silenced because the powers that be didn't necessarily like the fact that they were that he was able to do what he was supposedly able to do. It's just another example of kind of a tragedy of people not understanding the science becoming way before its time, and that being so disruptive and upsetting to contemporaries that they literally destroy that person's career, destroy that person's entire decades of work in their books, destroy anything that they develop, and again, whether he was actually able to disintegrate cancer with sound is irrelevant. The point is that these things, we're not just discovering them. This is stuff that you were trying to remind people of. This stuff existed, almost 100 years before us talking about it right now. And just because it came a little bit before its time, the science was just, I don't know, too scary for some, or it threatened some vested interest in a industry that was kind of built around it. I also want to kind of like point this, since we're talking about devices that were built, Cloudbusting and his Cloudbuster. I'm wondering if you could maybe expand on that and kind of explain what his design concept was and what you think maybe it was doing.
Sure, yeah. So I guess I'll touch on a little bit of what you said first, where I'm like reminding people that this exists. So definitely, people knew of electricity for a long time, right? There are evidence that, the ancient Egyptians had like pot batteries.
Yeah.
But there's no evidence of what they used them for. They knew how to make them, but they knew, but we don't know what they used them for. And so what I'm trying to tell people is that this is universal. This is a fabric of the universe. It is there. It was there forever. This is something that was built, and like Reich had said, this is something that life was built upon.
Yeah.
It's
a layer of reality.
Yeah, exactly. It's part of our universe inherently. And so that's pretty interesting to me, that you have this layer of the universe that people ignore, a layer of the reality that people say is not there, and that you have people, very powerful people, that want to squash those ideas because it interferes with the picture of reality that they put up, and they show to everyone, which is really interesting. And so that's why we do this work. We want to know more about it. We made our devices open source so that other people can go test them and see for themselves, and so that it's not something that you can go and silence or patent, or because the patent office will reject any patent that's made on this technology because it is open source in the first place. It counts as prior work. And so we did that to make it kind of powerfully unsquashable, if you would.
Yeah. Which was definitely a smart move. Definitely the smart move.
Which even if, someone were to come after me, or, some entity were to come after me, then, someone else could come and look at what we've done and keep that ball rolling in that aspect. So, this is what you asked about Wilhelm Reich and his Cloudbuster is something that we've looked at for a little while. And when Reich describes his Cloudbuster and how it works, and Orgone, he hit the nail on the head when it came to the discovery of Orgone. But, his research is done in a snapshot of time when they were also just understanding electricity as well. And so the devices and the techniques and the understanding of his machine were a reflection of the times as well. And he might not have gotten everything correct with how he understood that it to work. He recognized certain themes, and he recognized certain things that would make it more effective. And he tried to explain it in the best way he could, but that might not have been a true reflection of everything that we know about the world today. We know significantly more than what we did during his time.
And can measure more significantly.
And we can measure more. And so one of the things, during his time, they didn't even know about tectonic plates. Geology was, very infantile. But yet we are very knowledgeable of how geology works today. And one of the things that Reich said, and maybe let's back up. Let's back up to the Cloudbuster and what he did with his Cloudbuster, which was he had a series of metal pipes that were aligned pointing towards the sky, with a series of cables called BX cables that he put into flowing water. And he would note that flowing water would be better, or deeper water would allow his Cloudbuster to work better, as he, put it. And what does that better mean? Well, he claims his Cloudbuster would remove DOR from the atmosphere, or deadly orgone energy. We don't attribute deadly orgone energy to our understanding of orgone energy today. We think that what he was seeing was pollution and or early signs of EMF exposure from antennas that were really powerful, because that was right in the time where people were starting to understand electromagnetic waves and how they propagate across space. And so his interpretation of how it worked may not have been all the way correct, but we know that his antenna or his system helped to mitigate this, this what he called DOR, and he noted that it happened. This machine was more effective when he put these BX cables into deeper or flowing water. Okay. Now, a couple of things that we noticed is that, and the solution to the mystery is not necessarily found in just examining this device, because he also had a device called an accumulator. which was a box of alternating metal and organic material that he said would accumulate orgone. And the common theme that we see between these two and also orgonite is the presence of piezoelectric material. Strangely enough, in this box that he has, the piezoelectric material is usually bone, or in some cases, a calcium compound.
Interesting.
In orgonite, it is quartz crystals. In the Cloudbuster, what we expect is that it is the quartz in bedrock that is providing the piezoelectric material. And his Cloudbuster machine was stimulating the quartz in bedrock. And the way that we see him connecting to either flowing or deeper bodies of water, we know that water is conductive when it has dissolved salts and ions in it. And this would explain the connection to bedrock, because if it was a shallow pond, then the water would not be either flowing from bedrock in the case of natural springs, or coming off the land in the case of groundwater. It would just be sitting there, not necessarily connected to the bedrock, where deeper water also would be usually connected through the deepest of its points in a lake or something like that. And so by combining all of these these little clues that we see through his work and the machines that other people, we see this common thread of piezoelectricity. And by poking and prodding that a little bit further, you see that in each of these cases, they're stimulating piezoelectric material with electrical impulses, either from the environment, or in the case of Reich, from his machine that you would hold on to, or in the case of maybe acupuncture, sticking needles into specific places of your body creates, these needles. Every piece of metal is inherently an antenna of some frequency. And so you kind of see these things over and over and over again. And by, taking note of all of these little clues that people write about, that's how, you come to the conclusion that, okay, if this was real, then this is how it is generated. If this is how it's generated, then how can we make that more efficient? How can we make an electronic version? How can we add a power source to it? How can we make it more effective? How can we make it feedback to the environment? Just how can we improve it in general? And that's kind of the path that we're going down, because we see it as something that can hugely help environments, people, communities, just a general force of good in the world. And that's, and to understand this, more, to make new interesting devices, more powerful devices, as I said, a couple of times before, and, proliferate this technology across, across borders to everyone, that needs it, really.
Yeah, you bring up a couple really interesting points and I was actually gonna talk about quartz being embedded in certain areas of the country. This is a different portion of conspiracy lore, but a lot of people who see anomalous stuff around specific mountains, and you look at like the content of the mountain, and it's supposed that some of the anomalous stuff they see in the sky is actually just piezoelectric discharge from a mountain or area of geologic terrain that has like high quartz content. ball lightning, like anomalous electrical effects that people see in the sky is just because of some movement of those materials underground, and it just discharging electricity. And I'm of the mindset that, you know, absolutely, especially quartz. Like we actually use quartz in generic aspects of society in ways that people don't even recognize. Like quartz is a very fascinating thing in and of itself, and it is tangibly useful. We use it in all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
The other thing would be, you know, kind of going back to Egypt. So there is some circumstantial evidence that they were even using electric eels to electrify water that they would use for their own, you know, personal gardens or whatever. Like electroculture and the idea of harnessing natural electricity is a thing that's actually, there's a bunch of instances beyond just like Baghdad battery kind of stuff. But there's also this theory. Now, I don't necessarily know if I'm completely, I kind of think the pyramids were for a different purpose than this, but there's a whole camp of people that think it was harnessing or in some way discharging electricity by way of the limestone underneath it and the Nile running through that limestone. And it would like discharge ions and they would somehow capture that electricity. I'm saying all of these things to say, like, kind of reiterating your point, electricity is not a thing that we created. We now understand how to interface with it, but we didn't create it. And there's many instances throughout history of people interacting with natural electricity in a way that would, for the purpose of benefiting another aspect of their life, channeling the energy from here into another area so that it does something else for them. You know, I don't necessarily know if I buy into the Egyptians were arcing electricity off the top of the pyramids, but there's plenty of instances of Egyptians as far back as ancient Egypt understanding electricity as a core component of our existence in this plane of reality and using it to benefit another area of life. Because again, it's like you were saying, it's like the life is built on top of it. We're just figuring out how to interface with it. And there's a whole tangent you could go down to suggest that we are actually much more scientifically evolved than general society would be led to believe. Like there's many threads to suggest that different branches of physics have understood these concepts and excelled far beyond what is the public facing idea of the science, right? Like there's in a bunker somewhere, there's somebody doing experiments with these types of technologies or in some way using that technology. And we're just it hasn't been declassified yet. We don't get to play with it in the same way that they had cell phone technology in the 50s and 60s, but we didn't get them until like the 90s or 2000s. You know, I don't know how that is supposed to benefit us now, but it's just something interesting to think about. These are not, you know, there's a reason Tesla is hilarious to me. I live in New York. I have been to the New Yorker hotel. I have stood outside the room that he died in.
Really?
And a hilariously unknown fact about that building, at the time that Tesla was in it, it had the largest generator in the country. It had the largest electric generator in the country. That's the building that he died in. There's this whole thread that he was there doing experiments. It might also explain why Donald Trump's uncle, Fred Trump, was the FBI agent who came and took all of his papers upon his death.
Really?
So, yeah. So, again, just reiterating the fact, and that was a long time ago. So, just reiterating the fact that these sound like obscure, fringe ideas, but they're not. Some of the greatest minds of recorded recent, especially recent, but of all human history, were experimenting with these topics upwards of 100 years ago. And it's just, maybe that technology at that time was seen as too sensitive to be given to the masses. But again, kudos to open sourcing this stuff, because this is for the people. This is for beings of planet Earth. It's not for one government. It's not for one company. This is stuff that we should be freely allowed to interact with and interacting with. Even cloud busting, like another tangential aspect of conspiracy land here, but we do this thing where we spray chemicals in the sky and we can make it rain. It's called cloud seeding. It's prosaic technology. GE scientists discovered this shit in the 40s, and we do it like, you can go on the internet right now and you can hire companies to atmosphere test by spraying these chemicals in the sky. I used to live in Nebraska. People would do it over their crops. If we were light on rain, they would just spray chemicals in the air and it would make clouds condense and it would rain.
Saudi Arabia has a planned rain schedule.
Yeah, no, for that's a huge one that's on display. And again, they're not even, that's like any publication you want, you can look that up right now. China also famously did it over the Rose Gardens in the 2008 Olympics. And not saying it's, specifically for nefarious intent, but ultimately what they're doing is they're spraying chemicals in the sky. And that's not necessarily something any of us agreed to. And they're certainly not going to stop doing it just because we say. So something like a Cloudbuster, to me, and how I originally got down that rabbit hole, I lived in Tennessee, and it was horrendous. Like, there would literally be checkerboard grids in the sky, and then the rain would come. And it's like, I understand that this is rain, but I can't help but feel that it's not natural. And it's why I kind of really got into looking into cloud busting in the first place. But, for me, what you do and what you guys are experimenting with is important, because it's like the only real line of defense we have against things that are well beyond our control and well beyond even what you or I could do to stop it. The most we could hope for is to create some kind of bubble around ourselves where the effects of these things are lessened, or at least not be as subject to it as we are without the protections. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but
yeah. So you've seen our posts about cloud busting, and what we think is going on there is that Orgone itself affects water in the way that Dr. Gerald Pollack laid out, and in the right conditions can increase the crystallization of water vapor at these high altitude locations, and allow for water, the existing water in the atmosphere, to kind of crystallize around these injected chemicals. And then by doing that, these particulates become heavier than air and will sink to lower layers of the atmosphere, where they are absorbed and then dealt with in Earth's natural processes. Now, we're not saying that Orgone has the power to break apart these chemicals. The chemicals are still there. The only real solution to the spray problem is to stop spraying. But right. The ability for Orgone to help in this way has given us kind of a fighting chance, if you would, to clear the skies and allow it to fall to the earth faster and reduce the concentrations that are in the atmosphere. Does it also dirty our lands, lakes, rivers, and oceans? Yes, it does. I'm not saying it doesn't. I can't do anything about that.
Right, well beyond our control there.
Yeah, well beyond my control. But what I can do is create a device that helps in your local environment, and that's what we tried to do. Yeah, and so what we think cloud busting does is it also promotes increased rainfall through the same effect by allowing particulates to become heavier in air. It kind of captures that more of that water vapor from the atmosphere. And that's where we see increased precipitation, more snow. And the spray problem is super bad in Colorado as well. The snowpack in Colorado is of great concern to the federal government. It feeds 11 states of, drinking and agricultural water, water for power. The Lake Mead and Lake Powell situations are directly dependent on Colorado's snowpack. It feeds into the Mississippi. We have the Continental Divide running through the state, and so Colorado itself is a huge watershed, and many economies, the economy of the U.S. at large depends. Food security depends on the Colorado snowpack getting its adequate amount of snow, and so the winters in Colorado have been drier. We're in a 20-year mega drought. But what we've seen is the ability for Orgone to kind of help bring a little bit more precipitation, a natural, if you would, way of cloud seeding.
So what if money were not an object? How big of an amplifier would you build? Like if money and resources were not an object and you could somebody just cut you a blank check, like what would your plan be to create something that's like by magnitude of 10 or 100 bigger than what you've done?
That's an interesting question, something that I've mulled around with. It's definitely something we're interested in, but these things take time.
Sure.
I think any investor that's looking to get something out of Orgone Amplifiers, the entity, would be disappointed in the timescales that we expect research to take place. We one of our main goals as an organization, Orgone Amplifiers, is to create bigger, newer, better devices than we've created in the past, to keep pushing that envelope, different applications, different devices that suit those applications. But also at the same time, systematically prove that this is useful and works to gain that attention of, the general population, and the general scientific community. Now, one could say, who cares? Why would you care about, everyone, buying into it? Well, if I don't do that, then I don't think that it would go as far as it could go. I don't think that it could help as many people. If it keeps getting dismissed, if it keeps getting put down,
suppressed,
then ultimately it would be against the main goal, which is, helping as many people as you could. So that's kind of why we keep pushing on that aspect. But, there is, these dual kind of our split attention that we must take as a research institution is both researching how to make devices bigger and better, and also funding the research that would make it acceptable to people on a societal scale.
Yeah.
And so to go back to your question of, if you could get a blank check, I mean, yeah, sure, $1 million, that would be great. Give me a grant that, allows me to focus on this thing full time. As it is right now, the Orgone is an excellent idea. We've got an excellent thing going, but I have to, do other things to pay for, just general living expenses and all of those things. I don't take money from the project in order to fund those personal aspects of my life, in order to keep that incentive structure separate. And so Orgone Amplifiers really is a research project. We are for profit, but the profit goes towards funding these research initiatives because grants are not available to us, because funding from the government is not available to us, because we're doing this work in a field that's already been dismissed, that no one will touch with a 30-foot pole. This vital source of funding is, this open source effort type of thing. But if we were to get sponsors where we had complete creative control, and we were, we're talking on the orders of probably 5 years, 10 years to make, a device that is, up to that, that level of 10 or even 100 times more powerful than the devices that we have right now. You run up against some technical issues. As you scale up in power, you have to get bigger crystals, a bigger cross section, and by putting more voltage into the crystal, you have to design electronics around that higher voltage. You have to design all of your cabling, and I'm looking at an Orgone amplifier on my desk right now, just looking at, ooh, man, if I were to take this design high voltage, how would I really do that safely? And there's all these safety considerations, and maybe some of the techniques that we use right now won't suffice. We have exposed contacts on the crystal at the moment because it is low voltage, and it is safe to do that, to have, some exposed voltages. But if we were to take that, to high voltage, that would have to change. That's a safety issue,
Sure.
And so,
and a power demand issue.
Definitely. And well, when you start getting towards main power, you could do a lot with main. People run Tesla coils off of like a 12-volt car battery. So the mains power isn't as much of an issue, but it's the converting and handling of that power in the way that we want it to handle, and squeezing everything that we can out of crystals, because as you get bigger and bigger crystals, these specimens become rarer and rarer.
More expensive.
It becomes more expensive because of these these reasons, and so as much as those 100x devices would be awesome, they would be for a market and a purpose that we would definitely be interested in, but we don't know necessarily the economics of it at the moment. If it is even a device that we can make. And so when we do make one of these devices, it will be fairly special, a feat of, both engineering, other than just the Orgone generation technology. And so that's, these are hurdles that the project faces that can't just be solved with just money.
Yeah.
Needs time, needs,
research.
Research. And these would be, on the orders of, a couple more years. And, as we keep gaining, subjective tests are pretty expensive. I've been part of research efforts in the past. University of Austin charges like $300K for a subjective test. And so like when I say, oh yeah, $1 million would be great, like I really do mean like, can we get $1 million? You know what I mean? To actually get.
It would literally require that much. Yeah, bare minimum.
It would. We're not joking, and so that's a ton of amplifiers. You know what I mean? We're not there yet, and in a production standpoint, to be making that many amplifiers and selling them to be generating those type of funds. And so, would a GoFundMe help? Maybe. That's an idea. But then the scary part is, and this is the really scary part, is that once I get that money, then I actually have to do something with it. You know, like I have to actually, go out and do all those things. And then now that effort is splitting my time between the R&D and the production and now, all of these other research efforts. But we are super interested in it, and I will I will make that time, to do so. But inherently, some of that grant money would have to be spent towards my own personal living expenses, because then that would be the full-time
job,
job, and I would have to, take care of myself and my family in order for it to be that full-time thing. But these are all hurdles that we're trying to solve. And, I definitely, do want to be, honest that I do want to go full-time. I do want to have it, pay for, what I can in order so that I can do this and maximize, what I can put into this project, and then therefore what the project can produce and get out and do for the world type of thing.
No, I mean, that all makes sense. And definitely I'm always of the mindset of, you scale appropriately. It doesn't make sense to try and go 2 steps before the step that you're at. You scale up accordingly. My next question there would be, have you done any experiments with like arraying, creating an array of smaller amplifiers?
That's a good one. Yeah. So we have, and we've looked at, excuse me. We've looked at a couple of ways to do it. A lot of people take Orgone devices and they'll quote unquote grid them in order to create kind of a continuous field of Orgone over many places. And that we definitely are interested in, is creating these networks of Orgone amplifiers. But to actually connect them together, there's some technical challenges on how the Orgone amplifier works, that you can do it digitally if you really try. But the way that the Orgone amplifier is designed at the moment, you need to pull out all of the tricks in the electrical engineering book in order to kind of hook them together and make it so that one input control will control many. But we are working on that. It's something that we're definitely interested in. But I can't talk about that too much because it's still in development.
Yeah, sure. No. That I mean, really, my question was simply, is it something that can simply be daisy chained, or is it more logistics than just connecting them together with a wire? Like finding the simple bridge and connecting it with a wire?
So the device is all analog. There's no digital component in the Orgone amplifier, and we did that on purpose because we didn't want any proprietary software to be involved.
Sure. Makes total sense.
And so that increases the ability to traverse borders, to get around licensing. We took that aspect out of it altogether. And so to control an analog circuit, you use something called a potentiometer. And a potentiometer is a 3-terminal device. And unfortunately, with this setup, it only really allows you to control one at a time through one knob. One amplifier, one knob type of thing.
Yeah. And
you can't daisy chain them together by just connecting one more wire to another, to another, to another, to another. The circuitry doesn't like that as much because a potentiometer is a fairly low-powered device. And once you start adding more amplifiers on the same potentiometer, you quickly go out of the power rating of what that device is meant to do. So you need some way to input the control of the device to many different to many amplifiers at one time. And that's the point where, because you're running up against these part issues in a completely analog world, now you have to move to a semi-digital world where where each Orgone amplifier is still analog, but controlled by a digital circuit.
Or like digital power management. Yeah, right.
Yeah. And so that's what we're working on now, to look at how to digitally control multiple amplifiers at one time. Yeah.
Dude, this is friggin' incredible. It's super cool to see what you're doing. Again, just from the aesthetics are what drew me in. But then when I really started thinking about it, this I'm shocked that nobody has come to this conclusion. I'm really excited to see you applying the actual electrical engineering mindset to it, because that's really what it needs. Like this is how you build and advance this as a science that people can talk about, that people can quantify. On top of it looking cool and functioning, how do we do it in a way that is open source and can you build in the ability to expand upon it and grow beyond. Again, my understanding of Orgone and Orgone amplifiers before this was just the acrylic pyramids, and this you're really taking it to a completely different level, and I'm super excited to see like what comes of this as you continue to do it, because maybe somewhere in some bunker some people are experimenting with this stuff, but it's not there's like a piece of me that understands. You might be familiar with this guy. His name's Thomas Townsend Brown.
No, I actually don't.
So he's an interesting character. He basically, his one famous discovery or creation was the ionic breeze by Sharper Image.
Yeah.
But basically in the 50s, people said what he was doing was understanding ionic wind. But when you look into like his history, he was developing these plates that would basically perform like how we understand a UFO. They were like these circular metallic plates, and they could move at insane rates of acceleration. And he would do that by using high current, low resistance. I'm not sure exactly what it was, but it's a very simple formula. One plate was charged positive, one plate was charged negative, and the plate would propel itself based on the repulsion of the two charges, right? Yeah. So people said it was nuts. People said it wasn't worth looking into, and he kind of gets blacklisted. But now that 50 or 60 years have gone past, what actually happened was Lockheed Martin and McDonnell Douglas and Northrop Grumman put him in a bunker, and he was developing this technology. And there's a thread to suggest that the B-2 bomber, the Spirit bomber, it's called B-2 for Byfield Brown, which was the electrical thing that he discovered, the Byfield Brown effect. And there's this whole theory that the classified portions of that plane, the front edge of the plane is charged positive and the back edge of the plane is charged negative. And it allows it to move super fast. It creates like some kind of bubble in the front of it. Again, this is like a more electrical. It's not like fringe science stuff. It's like, because it's charged this way, it creates an area of low resistance in front of it that allows it to move through air faster. We also use that on like hypersonic missile development, and even some like submarine torpedoes. It creates we use a laser or electricity to create a bubble cavity in front of the thing, so that it's not pushing against water, it's actually pushing against a bubble of air and then the water. Does any of that make sense?
Yeah, I've seen some of that before. I can't really comment on it. I don't. I mean, there is definitely a lot of research in ionic, like the ionic breeze. I've definitely seen craft before of ionic propulsion. There definitely is spacecraft that use an ionic engine.
Sure.
And the idea is that they're able to accelerate constantly over long time periods, which enables the spacecraft to get to higher and higher speeds. And so it's not that far-fetched. But as for all of the applications and all of the myth behind Brown's Brown's field discovery, I can't necessarily speak to all of it.
Sure.
But yeah, I have heard of it, and it is interesting. Definitely something that people have talked about in the past.
I basically bring it up because it's like the mainstream idea is that this guy didn't know shit about shit. But what actually happened was McDonnell Douglas, Northrop Grumman, and Lockheed Martin were paying him an insane amount of money to develop this shit in a bunker somewhere. Huh. So again, kind of tying back to the converse, like that is not up for debate. He was getting paid by those companies to develop anti-gravity type propulsions as early as the 50s.
Crazy.
So just another reiteration of the fact that just because the mainstream sentiment isn't there, it does not mean the science is not worth looking into. It doesn't mean, you know what I mean? It doesn't mean that there isn't a there. I am inclined to believe when people are so resistant to this stuff, it means that there is in fact a there, and they just don't want it to be open source or discussed about because somebody can't put a meter on it.
Fair, yeah. Yeah, I mean, definitely if I disappear someday, they'll probably, I could see that, But at the same time, I've pondered it, it's something that's crossed my mind. But it's not something that I concern myself on, too much. And the reason is because I think by, weaponizing, if you would, the ability to spread information, their own systems of information, spreading, that I'm able to kind of hijack that narrative and spread it whether they like it or not.
Well, again, it's why, kudos for making it open source. This stuff is for the people. That other guy I was telling you about that's trying to harness electricity off of sonoluminescent bubbles. He's the same thing. He's a guy in Ohio. He's just an electromechanical engineer. He has a shop. He does stuff for hire. This is a thing he's trying to do on his own free time. And the goal would be to create a small but deployable energy harvester that is in some way safe and a sustainable. I think this is the thing that just pisses me off about most of the modern layer of society. We live in consistently unsustainable ways. And every time an option for a sustainable alternative is proposed, people get really pissed off. And it doesn't make sense to me. Why would we not want to move away from unsustainable ways of living to a more sustainable way of living? And anything that offers us the ability to manipulate the abundant energy around us at all times with minimal effects to our biologics and the biological entities all around us on the living being that we occupy Earth. I don't know. I just see it as valuable. So again, kudos for doing what you're doing, and I'm really stoked to see what you come up with in the future. And I guess I want to turn this over to you quickly before we wrap up and just give you an opportunity to again shout out where you want to drive people to, and I will of course leave all those links in the description so that people can check it out.
Yeah, thanks. So Yeah, definitely check out our Instagram. We're pretty active on Instagram. We got a TikTok as well. Go follow us over there on TikTok. Check out our site. Our research page has our articles. You could download them for free. We don't even ask you for an email because we don't even want any barriers to get this into people's hands. We're definitely doing a lot more testing, and so we're trying to be more active on socials, trying to get this out there. Thank you to everyone who has liked and followed our posts and our accounts so far. Super helpful. We just posted that one reel that did pretty well on TikTok that we're super stoked about. I guess just one more thing. Our site has a portion of it that allows people to submit their own testimonials with Orgone devices, not just our devices, but any Orgone device. And so we are collecting
this page, right? OA experiences.
Yes, yeah. And so this is crucial to continue building the evidence that we have of Orgone in general, not just our devices, all devices that have to do with Orgone. And so that's kind of one thing that we are looking at for our next paper is to compile all of these experiences that people have and do some statistics on them. So whatever people want to share, we are open to viewing it, and it will definitely, if it doesn't become any of our most powerful experiences, then it will definitely make it into our general body of knowledge concerning the state of the field. So I guess that's it. Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, James, and hopefully we can talk again sometime in the future.
Love it, dude. You heard it here, folks. Check out the sites. Check out the super cool things he's putting together over out there in Colorado. And, hope we'll just do another one once there's an update.
All right. Excellent. Thanks for having me, James.
This has been the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next one. See you guys. Thank you, Jay.
Thanks, man.
This has been the Totally Legitimate Business Podcast. The end. With your host, James Oliva. Executive producers, Clint G and James Oliva.
That's obnoxious.
Sound design, mix, and master by James Oliva.
Literally no one cares.
For more Totally Legitimate Business, subscribe to our YouTube channel at Totally Legitimate Business or add us on TikTok at TLB Pod.
When will this end?
Thank you for listening. Now get back to work.
Move it along, buddy.